The glass slipped. Not all the way. Not onto the floor. Just enough to send a thin river of sparkling water across the white tablecloth and straight into the lap of the man in the charcoal suit at table 12. Marcus Webb caught the glass in the same motion, pressed a folded cloth against the table, and opened his mouth to apologize. He did not get the chance. "Are you serious right now?" The man's voice cut through the low hum of the restaurant, the way a car alarm cuts through a quiet street. Sharp, unnecessary, designed to be heard. Marcus kept his face steady. "Sir, I'm very sorry. Let me get you. Do you have any idea how much this suit costs?" The table went quiet. Not just table 12. The two tables nearest to it went quiet too. A woman at table 9 stopped mid-sentence. A couple near the window looked over. The restaurant, which had been doing a decent impression of a calm Tuesday evening, was now doing something else entirely. The man in the charcoal suit was Donovan Price, 41 years old, founder and chairman of Price Capital Group, a firm that had acquired 14 mid-sized technology companies in the last 6 years and folded them into something larger and more profitable, the way a card player absorbs smaller hands into a winning one. He had been on the cover of 2 business magazines in the last 18 months. He had a driver, an assistant, a private membership at a club 3 blocks away, and a way of occupying a room that made other people feel like they were borrowing space in it. He was also, at this particular moment, using his full volume on a waiter who had spilled approximately 4 tablespoons of water. "I asked you a question," Donovan said. "Do you have any idea what this suit costs?" "I'll have it dry cleaned at the restaurant's expense," Marcus said. "I'll speak to the manager right now and we'll take care of." Dry cleaned. Donovan repeated the word the way someone repeats a bad joke. He looked at the 3 men seated with him, colleagues, or the kind of men who wanted to be colleagues, and he smiled in a way that had nothing warm in it. "He's going to dry clean it." One of the other men gave a short laugh. The other 2 looked at the table. "What's your name?" Donovan asked. "Marcus?" "Marcus." He said it slowly, the way people sometimes say a name when they're deciding what to do with it. "Marcus, let me ask you something. Is this your first week? Because most people, after a little practice, learn how to carry a glass without turning it into a problem for everyone around them." Marcus did not move. He did not shift his weight. He did not look at the floor or the table or the people watching. He looked at Donovan Price with an expression that was completely neutral, completely present, and completely unreadable. And he said, "I'll bring you fresh water and speak to my manager about the suit." "And the notepad," Donovan said, nodding at the small paper notepad tucked into Marcus's apron. "Do they not have apps for this? Or is that above your pay grade?" The table nearest to them had stopped pretending not to listen. A young server who had just come out of the kitchen with 2 plates stopped near the service station and looked at the floor. Marcus tucked his pen into his apron. "I'll be right back." He walked to the kitchen. Not fast, not slow. The exact pace of a man who has decided that none of what just happened will touch anything that matters. In the kitchen, he told his manager Gary about the suit. Gary, a heavy-set man with 17 years in restaurant management and the permanent expression of someone managing 17 different problems at once, nodded and said he'd go out and speak to the table. Marcus refilled the water glass. He went back out. He placed the fresh glass on the table. He did not make eye contact with Donovan Price. He did not say anything that wasn't required. He took the rest of the order with his notepad, wrote everything down, and returned to the kitchen. "You okay?" asked Priya, one of the other servers, when she passed him near the drink station. "Fine," Marcus said. He meant it. He was 34 years old. He had been a mechanical engineer for 8 years before the company he worked for lost 2 major contracts in the same quarter and cut 1/3 of its workforce in 48 hours. His severance had lasted 4 months. His marriage had not survived the combination of the job loss, the stress that came after it, and several other things that had been building quietly for years before that. His daughter, Amara, was 7. She was in 2nd grade at St. Clair Elementary, which was a private school that cost more per month than Marcus's car payment and rent combined, and which he was paying for because Amara had started there before everything changed, and pulling her out would mean changing her school, her friends, her routine, her teacher, her entire small world, and Marcus had already changed too many things in her life that year. So he worked the lunch and dinner shifts at Carver's, a mid-tier restaurant near the business district that did decent food and inconsistent tips, and he came home at 11 or 11:30 and looked in on Amara sleeping at his mother's apartment 2 floors below his, and he got up at 6:30 and made her breakfast and walked her to the school bus, and then went back upstairs and slept for 3 hours before his next shift. He had been doing this for 14 months. There was also the letter. It had arrived that morning, from the office of his ex-wife Claire's attorney, and it concerned a modification to the existing custody arrangement. He had read it twice. He had folded it into quarters, then into eighths, and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. He could feel it there now, against his ribs, small and precise and heavy in the way that only paper can be heavy. He did not think about the letter while he worked. He had developed a very specific ability to put things into separate rooms inside himself and close the doors, and he exercised this ability every shift because there was no other way to do the job well. If he thought about the letter, he would think about the attorney, and if he thought about the attorney, he would think about Claire, and if he thought about Claire, he would think about the custody schedule, and if he thought about the custody schedule, he would think about Amara, and if he thought about Amara during a service shift, he would not be able to function at the level the shift required. So he closed the doors. He went back to table 12 with the food. Donovan Price looked at his plate, then up at Marcus, and said nothing. His manager Gary had apparently smoothed things over enough. The table ate. Marcus managed his other 6 tables. He refilled water, ran food, cleared plates, calculated splits on the checks for table 8, and helped the new server, a young man named Oliver who had been working there for 3 weeks and was still learning the floor, carry an oversized order to a birthday party at table 4. It was a Tuesday. It was the kind of Tuesday that looks exactly like every other Tuesday and leaves no particular mark on the calendar. Donovan Price's table finished. They split the check 4 ways on corporate cards. The tip was 11%. Marcus saw the number, processed it, and moved on. What he did not see was Donovan Price pausing at the door. Just for a moment, not long enough for anyone to notice, just long enough for him to turn and look back at the restaurant floor, at the man with the notepad moving between tables, at the particular way Marcus Webb moved through a room that was slightly too loud and slightly too full, and asking more of him than it was paying him. Then the door closed. Marcus had 3 more tables after that, and a double mop, because the dishwasher called out at 9:30, and he left the restaurant at 11:40, with his jacket over his arm, and the letter still in the inside pocket. He drove his 2009 Civic to his mother's apartment building, took the stairs to the 3rd floor, and opened the door quietly. His mother, Gloria, was asleep in the armchair with the television on low. She had waited up. She always waited up. He turned the television off and covered her with the blanket from the back of the couch, and then went down the hall and looked in on Amara. She was sleeping on her side with one arm around the stuffed elephant she had named Gary, after, she had explained very seriously, a cartoon character, and not his manager. Though Marcus had found this extremely funny in the private way that single parents sometimes find things funny at 11:30 at night, with nobody around to share it with. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Her school play was tomorrow. She was a star in it, literally. The paper star costume was hanging on the back of her door, painted gold on both sides because she had insisted both sides needed to be gold even though the audience would only see one. He had helped her paint the second side. It had taken 40 minutes and gotten gold paint on the kitchen table, and he had not minded even slightly. He needed to get out of work by 6. His shift was scheduled until 6:30. He had spoken to Gary about it 2 weeks ago. Gary had said he'd see what he could do. Gary had not followed up. Marcus stood in the doorway and looked at his daughter sleeping, and thought about what it would mean to miss the play. He thought about it for approximately 4 seconds, which was as long as he allowed himself, and then he went down the hall to his mother's phone and texted Gary from it, because his own screen was cracked and sometimes didn't send messages properly. The text said, "Need to confirm the 6 o'clock leave for tomorrow. Amara's play. Please let me know." He went home. He set his alarm for 6:15. He lay down and was asleep inside of 3 minutes, because his body had learned, over 14 months, to take sleep the way it took other necessary things, without ceremony and without delay. The letter was still in his jacket. In the morning, Amara ate her cereal and talked about the play, and explained, at considerable length, the difference between being a regular star and being the star that the shepherds in the story followed, and Marcus listened to all of it, and asked the right questions, and packed her lunch with the note inside that he put in every day, a small piece of paper that said something different each time. Today's version reading, "You are going to be the best star that ever starred," which she would read at lunch, and which would make her smile in the particular way that made the left side of her face do something slightly different from the right. He walked her to the bus. He watched it pull away. He went back upstairs. He did not open the letter. He already knew what it said. Claire's attorney wanted to move Amara to a different school district. Claire had relocated to a suburb 40 minutes north, and the commute for her custody weeks was, the letter said, logistically unsustainable. The proposed solution was to transfer Amara to a public school, closer to Claire's new address starting in the fall. Marcus had read those words 8 times. Each time they said the same thing. Each time they landed in the same place. He put the letter back in its envelope, and put the envelope in the drawer under his kitchen counter, where he kept things he was not ready to deal with, but could not throw away. He slept for 3 hours. He got up. He put on his work clothes. He drove to Carver's. He tied his apron. He picked up his notepad. He walked out onto the floor. Gary stopped him near the host stand. "About tomorrow," Gary said. "Tonight," Marcus said. "The play is tonight." Gary looked at the clipboard he was holding. "We've got a big reservation at 6:15. Corporate table. I might need you to stay until—" "Gary," Marcus said it quietly. "I told you about this 2 weeks ago." "I know. I'm just saying, it might be tight. I need to leave at 6. Gary looked at the clipboard, looked at Marcus, made a sound that was not quite a yes and not quite a no. Marcus walked to his section and picked up his first table. He carried everything he was carrying, the letter, the play, the custody modification, the cracked phone screen, the 11% tip from the night before, in the same inner rooms, behind the same closed doors, and he did his job the way he always did it. Completely, carefully, without complaint. That was the thing about Marcus Webb that nobody in that restaurant fully understood yet. He was not a man who was simply enduring his life. He was a man who had decided, a long time ago, what kind of man he was going to be, and he was being that man as hard as he could, every single day, regardless of who was watching or what it cost him. The cost, on most days, was very high. He paid it anyway. Donovan Price did not come in that night. Marcus made it out by 6:04, still in his work shirt, and walked into the school gymnasium 7 minutes into the performance, and Amara saw him from the stage in the middle of the star song, and her face did the thing it did, the left side slightly different from the right, and she did not miss a single word of the song. He stood at the back wall with his arms folded and his eyes full and his face very still. Nobody in the gymnasium knew what he was carrying. Nobody needed to. 3 days later, Donovan Price walked back into Carver's, alone. The hostess, a young woman named Lucy, noted this because he had been in once before with a group and had not been the kind of customer you forgot quickly. She showed him to a table in Marcus's section, which was either chance or something else, and went back to the host stand. Donovan sat down and picked up the menu. He ordered coffee. He waited. He had told himself, on the drive over, that he was coming for the steak. Carver's did a very good flat-iron steak. This was true. It was also not the reason he was there, and Donovan Price had built an entire career on the ability to accurately identify the real reason for things, so he was aware, somewhere beneath the steak explanation, that the steak was not it. He was not sure what it was. He was just sure it had something to do with the way a man had looked at him 3 nights ago, and said nothing that wasn't required. Marcus came to the table. There was a beat, 1 second, maybe 2, of recognition between them. No warmth, no hostility, just the acknowledgement of 2 people who had shared a particular moment and were now in the same room again. "Coffee," Donovan said, because Lucy had already taken the order, and he was now just confirming it. which was an odd thing to do. Marcus poured it, took out his notepad. Donovan watched the notepad appear and did not say anything about it. He ordered the steak. Over the next 40 minutes, Donovan Price did something he had not done in a professional context in a very long time. He observed without agenda. He watched Marcus Webb manage a section that was, by any reasonable measure, too large for one person that evening, because a server named Oliver had called out sick, and nobody had been brought in to cover. Marcus did not rush. He did not skip steps. He did not make the face that people make when they are being asked to do more than they are being paid to do. He simply expanded to fill the space and did the work, moving through the room with a particular economy of motion that Donovan, who had spent 15 years watching people perform under pressure, recognized immediately as the movement of someone who had been doing a difficult thing for a long time and had found the most efficient version of how to do it. He also noticed the family at the next table, a mother, a grandmother, and a little girl of about 7 who was drawing on the Paper Kids menu with the 4 crayons the restaurant provided. The little girl was drawing what appeared to be a house, with a very large sun, and several people of different heights, which is what children draw when they are drawing the important things. When Marcus swung through that section to clear plates, the little girl grabbed the sleeve of his jacket. She said something. Donovan could not hear what. Marcus stopped. He crouched down to the girl's level. He looked at whatever she was drawing and said something back. The girl laughed. Her mother smiled at Marcus with the specific gratitude of a parent whose child has been treated like a whole person by a stranger. Marcus said one more thing, touched the edge of the drawing once with one finger, and stood up and moved on. The whole exchange had taken less than a minute. Donovan looked at his steak. He ate it slowly. When Marcus brought the check, Donovan had already put his card on the table. He signed the receipt without looking at the total and got up and put on his coat. He was almost to the door when he stopped. He turned around, went back to the table. He picked up the signed receipt. He wrote something in the tip line. He put it face down on the table and walked out without looking back. Marcus cleared the table 6 minutes later. He picked up the receipt and looked at the number in the tip line. It was $200 on an $80 meal. There was nothing written in the message line. No explanation. No name. Marcus looked at the receipt for a moment. Then he folded it and put it in his apron and went to his next table. In the parking lot, Donovan sat in the back of his car and looked out the window. His driver, an older man named Ted, did not ask where they were going, because Donovan sometimes sat and thought before he said. Ted had worked for him for 6 years and understood this. After a while, Donovan said, "Office." Ted pulled out of the parking lot. Donovan looked at his phone. He had 11 messages and a calendar alert for a 7:30 dinner with a group of investors. He put the phone face down on the seat beside him. He looked at the city going by outside the window. He thought about a man crouching down to talk to a little girl about her drawing. He thought about the specific quality of stopping that Marcus did. Not the stopping of someone who has time to stop. The stopping of someone who has very little time and is choosing to use a piece of it on something that doesn't benefit him in any measurable way. Donovan Price dealt in measurable benefits. He always had. He could value a company's assets in 40 minutes and identify the inefficiencies that were costing it money within an hour of walking the floor. He was excellent at this. It had made him very successful and had cost him several other things over the years, though he rarely itemized those. He thought about the notepad. He had mocked the notepad, out loud, in a full restaurant, in front of the man who used it, in front of other people. He had made a point of it. He had done it the way he sometimes did things in a certain kind of mood, with performance, with precision, with the specific intention of landing the remark where it would sting. He had done it because the glass had wet his suit, and he had been in a bad mood since that morning, over a deal that was taking longer than he wanted. And there had been a person in front of him who could not object, and he had used that. He sat with that for the length of 4 traffic lights. Then he picked up his phone and called his assistant. "I need you to find someone for me," he said. "Not professional. Personal. Someone who can look up a private individual discreetly." "Yes, I'll explain in the morning." He hung up. He looked out the window again. He was not sure what he was doing. He was sure of very little in the last 3 days, which was unusual for him. What he was sure of was that something had happened at table 12 on a Tuesday night that he had not finished thinking about, and Donovan Price did not leave things unfinished. He was not a sentimental man. He did not do things for no reason. This had a reason. He just hadn't named it yet. The file arrived the following afternoon. Marcus Anthony Webb, 34 years old. Previously employed as a mechanical engineer at Holden Structural Solutions for 8 years, rising to senior project engineer before the firm lost 2 government infrastructure contracts and reduced its workforce by 31%. Marcus's entire department had been eliminated in a single Friday afternoon meeting. His severance, 16 weeks. Marital status, divorced. 1 daughter, Amara, age 7, currently enrolled at St. Clair Elementary. The enrollment had been maintained through the separation, and through the severance period, and through 14 months of restaurant work, with no interruption. The custody arrangement, shared, alternating weeks. Currently under legal review, with a modification filed by the former spouse's attorney, proposing a school transfer and a revised geographical arrangement. Donovan read this section 3 times. He set the file on his desk. He looked at his office. It was a large office with glass walls on 2 sides, and a view of the city below, and carefully selected furniture, and the kind of silence that money buys. He had worked for this office. He had wanted this office for a very long time before he had it, and once he had it, he had thought about it less than he expected to. He picked up the file again and found the attachment. It was a photograph from a school newsletter, the St. Clair Spring Showcase. A row of children in costumes. In the front row, a little girl in a gold paper star costume, both sides painted gold. Her face was turned slightly toward the edge of the frame, toward the man standing just inside the gymnasium door. The man was in his work shirt, the only parent still in work clothes. His jacket was over his arm. He was 7 minutes late to a thing he had clearly been counting the hours toward, and he was grinning. Not a polite grin, not a tired grin. A grin that had nothing complicated in it. Donovan looked at the photograph for a long time. That evening, he gave a speech at the annual dinner of the Price Foundation, a charitable organization he had established 6 years ago with a portion of his firm's annual earnings. The speech was about opportunity, about seeing potential in places others overlook, about the responsibility of success. He had given versions of this speech several times. He knew where the applause lines were. He knew how to move through the room after, and shake the right hands and say the right things. He got to the 3rd paragraph and stopped. Not visibly. Not in a way the room could see. He kept speaking, but something inside the speech went hollow, the way a wall can look solid from the outside while being empty behind the surface. He finished. He took the applause. He shook the hands. On the drive home, he did not speak. Ted did not ask. Marcus made it to the play that night, too. He had won the argument with Gary about leaving at 6. Not cleanly, not easily, but he had won it. He had walked into the gymnasium in his work shirt, Amara's spare crayon drawing folded into his jacket pocket, because she had made it for him, and he had forgotten to take it out. Amara saw him from the stage. Both sides of the star costume were gold. She had not made a single compromise on that. She did not wave. She was a professional about the performance, but the left side of her face did the slightly different thing. Marcus stood at the back of the gymnasium with 60 other parents and grandparents, and he watched his daughter be a star, in every sense of that word, and he did not think about the letter in the kitchen drawer, or the attorney, or the school transfer, or the custody schedule, or the cracked phone screen. He just watched her. He carried so much, every day, and in this specific room, for this specific 40 minutes, he put it all down. She took her beau with the other children, and found him immediately in the crowd of adults with that particular radar that children have for the one person in a room who belongs entirely to them. She ran to him. He caught her. The paper star crinkled against his shoulder. "You came," she said. "I always come," he said. He meant that in more ways than one. Donovan Price walked into Carver's for the 3rd time on a Sunday, during the slower brunch service, and sat in Marcus's section and ordered coffee. Marcus came to the table. There was the same beat as before. Recognition. No warmth, no hostility. Donovan wrapped both hands around the coffee mug and said, "I looked you up." The restaurant continued around them. Someone at table 7 asked for more orange juice. A child at the family table near the window dropped a spoon on the floor with a clang that made two people look over. The morning light came in flat and white through the front windows. Marcus set the coffee pot down. He did not set it down the way people set things down when they are nervous. He set it down the way people set things down when they are deciding something. "I'm going to need you to say exactly what you mean," he said, "before I decide whether to keep standing here." Donovan looked at him. He had expected several responses to that opening. This was not one of them. He found, to his own surprise, that he respected it. "You were a mechanical engineer," he said. "I was. Senior project engineer. 8 years. Holden Structural." Marcus said nothing. "I'm opening a new consulting division," Donovan said. "Infrastructure. We work with municipal and private clients on large-scale structural projects. The gap we keep running into is translation. The engineers speak one language, and the investors speak another, and nobody on my current team can do both. I need someone who understands mechanical systems from the inside and can walk into a room full of people with money and explain those systems in a way that makes those people want to put that money somewhere specific." He stopped. He picked up his coffee, put it down without drinking. "I watched you manage 8 tables by yourself on a Friday night. I watched you explain a menu modification to a table of 6 in a way that made them feel like they'd chosen it themselves. I watched you stop for a little girl who grabbed your sleeve even though you had 4 other tables waiting, and I watched the way that family looked at you after." Marcus was still. "You did all of that," Donovan said. "Better than half my senior staff handle a 40-minute presentation with a slide deck and a week of preparation." The orange juice arrived at table 7. Someone across the room laughed at something. "You mocked me," Marcus said. "I know. In front of a full restaurant." "I know. In front of people I work with every night." "Yes." The silence between them was not comfortable. Donovan made no effort to fill it. He did not apologize again with another layer of words. He had said what he had done and he sat in it, which was the first honest thing he had done in front of another person in a long time. Marcus looked at the window, looked back. "I'll think about it," he said. He meant it. He did not say it to be polite or to end the conversation, or to give himself room to say no later without the awkwardness of saying it now. He said it because it was true, because this was a real thing that required real thought, and Marcus Webb did not make important decisions standing next to a coffee pot on a Sunday morning. "Here," Donovan said. He put a business card on the table, plain white, just his name and a number. Marcus picked it up, looked at it, put it in his apron pocket. He refilled the coffee and went to his next table. Donovan sat for another 15 minutes. He drank his coffee. He watched the room. He left 30% and walked out without looking for Marcus to say goodbye. In the parking lot, Marcus's 2009 Civic was near the service entrance. The back left bumper had a dent that had been there a while. The rear window had a small St. Clair Elementary sticker in the bottom corner. Donovan looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then he got into his car. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table after Amara was asleep and took the business card out of his apron and set it on the table and looked at it. He poured himself a glass of water. He sat with both for a while. He thought about the engineering work. He thought about what it had felt like to solve a load-bearing problem on paper and then stand on site and watch the solution become a real thing in the world that people walked across or drove through or leaned against without knowing the math that held them up. He thought about how long it had been since he had done that. He thought about what it might feel like to do it again. He also thought about Donovan Price mocking his notepad in a restaurant full of people. Both things were true. He was old enough to know that both things could be true at the same time. That a person could be the source of harm on a Tuesday and the source of something useful on a Sunday, and that navigating that was not a simple thing but was a necessary one. He thought about Amara's school, the gold star costume, the attorney's letter in the kitchen drawer. He picked up his phone. The screen was cracked in the bottom left corner but still worked if you knew which part to avoid. He called his mother. She answered on the second ring. which meant she had been awake. "Hey, Mama." "Hey, baby. You okay?" "Yeah," he said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Gloria Webb, who had raised 3 children on a nurse's aide salary, and put all of them through school on the belief that hard work was not a ceiling but a floor, talked for 43 minutes about her neighbor's garden, and her church's upcoming event, and a television program she had started watching, and a memory she had of Marcus's grandmother that she had not thought about in years, and suddenly wanted to share. Marcus listened to all of it. He sat at the kitchen table with his water and his cracked phone and the business card, and he listened to every word. He did not mention the offer. Not yet. It was not ready to be said out loud. It was still something he was carrying around the edges of, feeling the weight and the shape of it before he put a name to it. What he knew was this: he was 34 years old, and he had made a decision a long time ago about what kind of man he was going to be. And that decision did not have an expiration date attached to it, and it did not depend on whether the world was currently cooperating. He had always been this person. The restaurant had not made him. The severance had not broken him. The custody letter had not defined him. He was Marcus Webb, and whatever happened next, he would meet it the same way he had met everything else. Fully, carefully, without complaint. 8 months later, the conference room on the 14th floor of Price Capital Group had a new occupant, 3 days a week. He arrived early and left on time, and never left on time without reason, and the reason was usually visible on the small St. Clair Elementary sticker on the back of his laptop case. He had kept 2 shifts at Carver's through the first 2 months of the consulting role, which was the most exhausting period of his adult life, and also the period in which he learned the most. He had kept them because the numbers had not yet proven what they later proved, and Marcus did not burn bridges based on projections. He burned them only when the crossing was complete. By the 3rd month, the math made the decision for him. He was not a different person at Price Capital. He was the same person in a different room. He brought the same notepad, the same habit of watching a room before he spoke in it, the same economy of motion, the same ability to translate between 2 groups of people who were talking past each other and find the sentence that made both groups lean forward. It turned out this was not a common skill. It turned out this was, in fact, extremely rare, and that Donovan Price had known it was rare the moment he watched Marcus manage 8 tables and a little girl's drawing on the same Friday night. Donovan was not easy to work with. Marcus had expected this and was not surprised by it. He was demanding and precise, and occasionally short with people in ways that revealed old habits that had not yet been replaced by better ones. Marcus did not pretend these moments did not happen. He also did not make them larger than they were. He had a job to do. He did it. The custody case was settled in the 4th month. Not perfectly, because nothing about this was a story where things resolved perfectly. Amara would spend alternating weeks with her mother. Claire had agreed to keep Amara at St. Clair, at least through the end of the school year, in exchange for a small adjustment to the shared school week transportation arrangement. Marcus now drove 40 minutes each way, 3 mornings a week, to keep Amara at the same school with the same friends, and the same teacher, and the paper star costume still hanging on the back of her bedroom door. He did not mention this to anyone at work. It was not a story he was telling. It was just Tuesday. At Donovan's foundation dinner in the fall, Marcus sat 2 tables away from the podium and listened to a version of the speech about opportunity and potential and the responsibility of success. He had heard a version of this speech, described by people who had attended these dinners before. He watched Donovan give it. Donovan was better at it than he used to be. Not more polished, less polished actually, more specific, more willing to use the pauses, more willing to sit in the silence, rather than filling it with the next prepared line. After the dinner, Donovan found Marcus near the exit. "What did you think?" he said. "Better than last year, supposedly," Marcus said. "You weren't there last year." "I know what I heard." Donovan looked at him. The left side of his mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was something in that neighborhood. "Go home," Donovan said. "Amara's at your mother's tonight, right? How do you know that?" "You mentioned it this morning." Marcus considered this. "You remember things I say in passing." "I remember things that matter," Donovan said, and then seemed slightly surprised that he had said it, and looked away. Marcus got his coat and went to the door. Night, Price. Night? The thing that happened next. The thing that people who heard later pieces of this story sometimes pointed to as the moment everything changed, was not a dramatic moment. It was not a confrontation or a revelation or a speech. It was a small thing, the kind of thing that only registers if you are paying a very particular kind of attention. Donovan Price was in a restaurant in Dallas for a business dinner in the 6th month of Marcus's role at the firm. Not Carver's, a different restaurant. Nicer, with darker lighting and a longer wine list and the kind of quiet that expensive restaurants buy with thick carpeting. He was there with a man named Gregory Holt, an investor whose firm he had been courting for 2 quarters, and whose money would close a significant gap in his current acquisition fund. The server who brought their water was young, maybe 22, and his hands were slightly unsteady, and when he reached across to pour Gregory's water, he caught the edge of the bread basket and tipped it, scattering rolls across the white tablecloth. It was a small thing, 3 rolls and a moment of chaos, and a very young man, whose face went the specific color of someone who is terrified of what comes next. Gregory Holt opened his mouth. "Leave it," Donovan said. Gregory looked at him. "The rolls. Leave them. We'll move them ourselves." He picked up one of the rolls and put it back in the basket. He looked at the young server. "Don't worry about it. Can you bring us some more water when you get a chance?" The server nodded. His shoulders came down about 2 inches. He said thank you and went back to the kitchen. Gregory watched all of this with an expression he couldn't quite arrange. "You're not what I expected," he said to Donovan. "People keep saying that," Donovan said, and opened his menu. He was thinking, briefly, about a Tuesday night in Chicago, about a man who carried 8 tables and a letter in his jacket pocket, and a daughter's play in his chest and a cracked phone screen in his pocket, who looked at him with an expression that was completely neutral, completely present, and completely unreadable, and said nothing that wasn't required. About what it had cost him to do that. About what it cost in general to be that kind of person in a world that did not always make it easy. He picked up his water. He thought about calling Marcus tomorrow, not about work. Just to say that Amara's 2nd grade school showcase was being mentioned in the St. Clair newsletter and he had seen it because Marcus had forwarded it to the office distribution list by accident, and nobody had said anything about it. He would probably not make the call. He would probably forward the newsletter back to Marcus with a 1-line note, and that would be the version of the thing that actually happened. But he thought about it. That was different from before. Before Table 12, he would not have thought about it at all. Amara Webb turned 8 in the spring. She had a party at her grandmother Gloria's apartment, with 12 children from her class, and a cake that Gloria made herself, because bought cakes were, Gloria felt, a failure of effort. The cake was chocolate, with yellow frosting, and Amara's name written in cursive across the top. Marcus stood in the kitchen doorway and watched his daughter surrounded by her friends, laughing at something one of them had said, and he thought about the geometry of his life, the angles that had once been closing in. They had not closed. He had not let them. He was not where he had expected to be at 34. The life he was living was not the life he had planned. It was louder and harder and more expensive in the ways that didn't involve money, and it had a note in a child's lunchbox every single day because some things you do not negotiate on. And it had 40-minute drives 3 mornings a week and a cracked phone screen he had finally replaced, and a consulting role that was, by any honest measure, going better than he had allowed himself to hope. It was his life. He had built it out of what remained after everything that had broken, and he had built it with both hands, and it held. He went into the kitchen and helped his mother cut the cake, and when Amara noticed him, she shouted, "Daddy," in the way she had been shouting it since she was 2, with the full force of everything she contained, and he turned around and caught her because he always did. That was the whole story, really. Not the offer from a man who had finally looked up, not the consulting role or the custody settlement or the roles in a Dallas restaurant, not the business card on the kitchen table or the $200 tip or the notepad that someone once thought was worth mocking in a full room. The whole story was a man who decided what kind of man he was going to be, and was that man every single day, regardless of the cost, regardless of the audience, regardless of whether the world was watching or keeping score. The world eventually caught up. It usually does, for people like Marcus Webb. It just takes its time.